Well, welcome to the 2009 UC-CSU CCC Sustainability Conference at the University of California, Santa Barbara. My name is Ron Cortez, and I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Administrative Services here at UCSB, and your official host for the conference this year. Thank you. Welcome. UCSB has hosted the Sustainability Conference 3 times before, and we are truly honored that we were chosen to host for the 4th time this year. We hope that you find the UCSB campus a wonderful place to exchange ideas about sustainability and network with your colleagues, new and old. And I invite you to explore our campus and the surrounding communities. Take a walk on the beach, ride your bike downtown, and I'm sure you will agree, Santa Barbara is a great place to visit. The Sustainability Conference has always been a successful event, and once again, this year's conference is sold out. This shows how important this event is to you and all of the college and university systems in California and beyond. Despite our current difficult economic challenges, all of you have made attending this conference a priority, doing what it takes to get here. For some of you, that meant paying your own way, and I commend you for your efforts. Here at the University of California, Santa Barbara, we are very proud of our green reputation, a reputation that has grown out of the collaborative efforts of our faculty, students, and staff. Our campus has a long history of sustainability practices, with Chancellor Henry T. Yang having declared UCSB is committed to global leadership and sustainability through education, research, and action. So we're taking this leadership role seriously, especially at this conference. In order to make this event more sustainable, both environmentally and financially, you would notice some changes from last year, the main one being the use of webcasting for several of our sessions. In fact, this plenary session is being broadcast on the web to 27 locations right now, including Washington State, Missouri, Kentucky, Texas, and Maryland, among many others. Let's say hello to all those that are watching. So we are excited about being able to try out this mix of online and real-world sharing of information at this conference, and hope that it serves as a successful model, not only for future sustainability conferences, but for all conferences in higher education. I have faith that the Los Angeles Community College District will take the concept of a sustainable conference a step further when they host this in 2010. I've heard a lot of great things about their plans for the event and look forward to attending it myself. Before we move on to our speakers, I would like to take a moment to thank the many people who have made this conference possible. The conference steering committee, made up of representatives from the University of California, the California State University, and the California Community College Systems. The many student and staff volunteers who donate their time to make sure things run smoothly. The sponsors who keep the event affordable for all of us, and the special thanks to Katie Maynard and Mo Lovegreen for all of their work. Without their hundreds of hours of planning, this conference would not be possible. Where is Katie Maynard and Mo Lovegreen? Maybe we can have them stand. They're probably busy working. Well, anyway, we thank them very much for all of their work. Without further ado, I'm honored to introduce the first of our 2 distinguished speakers this morning, University of California Regent Bonnie Reese. Ms. Reese was appointed by the University of California Board of Regents in 2008 by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. In addition, Regent Reese is an operating advisor with Pegasus Capital Advisors in Malibu, where she focuses on clean tech innovations. Prior to her regent duties, she served as a senior advisor to Governor Schwarzenegger. We are thrilled that she offered to travel here and speak to us today, so please join us in welcoming Regent Bonnie Rees.
Thank you, Ron. It's a great privilege and joy to be here at this gathering. It really encompasses my two great passions, education and environment. I think there's no two more important areas to focus on if we're going to be successful for the future of our state, our country, and our planet. It's a great privilege to be on the Board of Regents of UC, and I take great pride in the leadership UC has in this state, country, and world in the area of sustainability. But it's also a great privilege to be among you today, because each of you are leaders in the modern environmental movement, and as such, you're helping change the consciousness and transitioning us to viewing business and the world in the way of sustainability. And there's no more critical thing to be doing and no more important time to be doing it in, as our scientists are telling us we really are near the tipping point. So I know I only have a few moments here with you, and I've seen the agenda, and you have fabulous speakers for you, and there'll be tremendous amount of knowledge shared and information shared during this conference. So I guess in a welcome and in a way to kind of be a cheerleader about why I feel your work is so important, I just wanted to share one story, and if I have time, two stories. The Governor and Maria have been my best friends for 30 years. I met Maria when I was in law school in Washington, D.C., and I worked for her uncle, Senator Ted Kennedy. And then I came out to California, and I practiced entertainment law for a while, and then I moved into the world of starting 501c3 nonprofits. The first was an environmental, and then I ran Arnold's After School Foundation. And it's an interesting long story for another day, but in the philosophy of we plan and God laughs, I found myself suddenly, when Arnold announces he was running for governor, to be called by Maria and Arnold that night and asked to go into the campaign office during the recall and be senior advisor there. And it was a very interesting ride. At first, I didn't plan on going to Sacramento if he won, but then, of course, there he goes winning the governorship, and then I end up being senior advisor to Arnold in Sacramento. And while involved in all policy and strategy and the legislation that he has to review, the 1,500 bills on the average that get passed every year, I was involved in many interesting things. But the one thing that really was most dear to me was being involved in the drafting and the negotiating of AB 32, which was California's landmark cap-and-trade bill. And what makes it even more relevant is that in the Bush administration years, when our nation and Congress was not taking any leadership on this, California's leadership, and then after California's leadership, many other states joined in, did what California did, formed MOUs, formed regional agreements, and now with the Obama administration, they are actually looking to the work of the states, and they're looking at what's been done here and the leadership here in California. So one of the stories I wanted to share with you, by way of really saying why I feel everything you're doing is so important, in particular in these difficult times, why I really hope you hang in there and have some perspective about the importance of this, is when the re-election was going on, and I was involved with the campaign staff, you have to work closely with the inside office. About a few weeks before the election, the polls were showing, it became clear at that point that Arnold was probably going to win re-election. So he had asked myself and the senior people in the cabinet and the administration to start working on the State of the State speech that he'll be delivering in his inaugural address, which really shapes the vision for the next 4 years. He wanted us to look at the things we can do in K-12 education reform that can improve that in this state, infrastructure building, do we need to build new schools, new roads, fix our levees, infrastructure, bridges and such, and water storage, do we have enough water to meet our state's needs, etc. And during that time, we were meeting with a lot of experts, many of whom actually came from university leadership, and they were saying to us, because AB 32, which really creates a cap-and-trade system, but really tasks the California Air Resource Board with figuring out the regulations to enforce that, set up a system where you know, for that to succeed, I thought to myself, okay, I knew after the re-election, because it's like 20-hour days, 7 days a week, I moved from Malibu to Sacramento, so I told Arnold and Maria that after the re-election I was going to move back. So it became important to me to focus on, I wanted to make sure when I left that we really were on a path, and the state was really on a path to see that we could truly meet the goals of AB 32. So in California, we have a renewable portfolio standard that's mandated on the utilities, you know, which means that they have to, a certain percentage of the electricity that they provide their customers has to come from renewable sources. So it left a very important area, and that is transportation. So in meeting with these experts, they were explaining to us at the time, and this was about 3 years ago, that a lot of the enthusiasm in the United States for moving off of fossil fuels was really politically based on getting us not dependent on the Middle East because of what was going on with the war in Iraq and such. And yet they said that in Canada, there was such an abundance of in tar sands and in developing transportation fuel from that, which is as dirty, if not dirtier, than some of the fossil fuels that we were importing from the Middle East. And that tens of billions of dollars were starting to be invested in that. And the experts from universities and energy experts and NRDC experts and others were saying that there is, to date, no one in the world had created a transportation fuel carbon content standard, and how significant that would be. So in putting that together, I know that Arnold was busy with the re-election, and he was looking for a lot of other stuff that was like more short-term and that was relevant to people's lives in the current day. And it became clear how important this would be for a state the size of California, because we're such a big market that we represent, to say to the oil producers that starting at a certain date, you won't be able to sell transportation fuel in this state unless it meets a certain carbon content standard. And we're not going to say what the winner is going to be. You could figure that out. You could put your research dollars there. We can let innovative minds at the universities and elsewhere figure out what the winner should be. But we are going to say that the carbon content standard is going to be important. So because of Arnold being busy with the re-election and having tasked us to focus on other things for his next 4 years, I flew back into LA to go to Maria and Arnold's house one evening, and I actually even came with a memo because I thought this was going to be so important from a historic point of view. And the message I actually shared from the bottom of my heart with Arnold and Maria was that as important as building roads are, as important as healthcare reform is, and all of this really is, as important as figuring out short-term budget solutions, and we see now how important that issue is. As important as all of that is, I said 100 years from now, when they look back, 100 years from now, when people look back, this will be what will be remembered. That we stood at a point in time where we helped transition the state, the country, and the world off of fossil fuels and onto renewable energy, and as such dealt with the most critical issue of our time, which is climate change. And you'll hear from speakers about how climate change just isn't some scientific facts and words. It's people's lives. I mean, we see Katrina, it's hurricanes, it's diseases, it's cancer, it's life and death issues. So as difficult as any budget situation is, and it is, as critical as it is when people lose their jobs and we have 11.5% unemployment, and that's real at people's tables and paying the bills and feeding their family. Having health care is real, and it's important. I don't underestimate that. But we are actually facing the most critical issue of our time, and it's not whether the planet will survive, because in one way or another this planet will. But it's the fragile ecosystem that in this galaxy, this planet has that supports life. And whether our human impact on it, which in 1962 when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring and took on the chemical industry and started to begin the dialogue about our human impact on the environment. And then in 1970, Senator Gaylord Nelson created the first Earth Day to shake up the political establishment, and that led to the EPA and led to the Clean Air Act and led to the Clean Water Act. And then the Kyoto Protocol in 1995. Well, in 3 years, the world will gather in Copenhagen. And the work that you do here, the work that the leaders of the thought leaders and the people in the universities do, because throughout history, that's where the action is: social reform, political reform, innovation. It happens at colleges and universities. And what you're doing now will determine, when 100 years from now, whether they look back and see, did we meet this great challenge or didn't we? So as difficult as all the other challenges we see our state facing economically, our friends facing economically, students with fee increases, it's very difficult being a region right now with the difficult choices that we're facing. But as difficult as that all is, we all know that when ourselves or a loved one is facing a life or death challenge and we're in the hospital, it really does make all the other pale by comparison. And I know every time I wake up, I'm a spiritual person, I wake up and I kind of have a conversation with God every morning when I begin my day. And I first start by just being grateful that I woke up to see another day, that I'm alive, that I'm healthy, that I have the ability to think and walk and live and feel and be for another day. So as difficult as all the other issues are, having our health and having our well-being really does make all the other things seem small by comparison. So the work you're doing is critical, and I also want to say from another perspective that Terry Tamminen, my friend, who was Arnold's EPA secretary and really responsible largely for a lot of the work happening in 39 states that now the Obama administration is patterning after, that we are helping a private equity firm spend billions of dollars in sustainable companies. And that is possible, and it's a long story how that came to be also, but 3 years ago I was at the Milken Global Conference, and I saw the enthusiasm of the CEOs of all the big capital markets and capital companies in the world, and I saw them having enthusiasms to start to move billions and billions and tens of billions of dollars into sustainability. And that's happening not just because of government policy and not just because consumers are interested, but it's happening because large institutions like Cal State, Community College of California, UC of California, and other universities are procuring or having sustainable policies. On the Grounds and Buildings Committee at the UC, we are currently have $8.5 billion in construction projects going on at the 10 campuses, and they're all LEED certified. And you people here, you are on the forefront of that leadership, and what you do is so critical. And coming from the entertainment industry, since I was an entertainment lawyer for a while, it's like the greatest suspense story ever told. Will our human impact on the earth be such that we mess with the ecosystem to not support life anymore? And I'm just an optimist by nature, and I just believe that with the work of wonderful people like yourselves, and it's a privilege to be among you, that this story will have a happy ending. So I just wanted to thank you all for the work you're doing and tell you how, from my perspective, it couldn't be more important. So thank you very much.
Well, let's thank Regent Bonnie Reese. That was just fantastic. I really appreciate the just the motivation and the really just describing sort of the purpose of why we're here today. And well said. We really appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you for your time. Next, I would like to introduce David Newport to come up to speak to us, who is our keynote speaker for today. And why don't you come on up and give us some of your great thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My mother faxed over the introduction. So I appreciate being here today, and let me tell you a little bit about how honored I am to be here today. My name is Dave Newport. I'm the director of the Environmental Center at the University of Colorado in Boulder. That center was founded in 1970 on Earth Day by students and has been running continuously ever since. So we're in our 40th year. We run the recycling program, the energy program, the climate program, transportation program, the environmental justice program, a few other things. We have over 100 students that work for us, 8 professional staff, and the Chancellor doesn't even mind it when I say this. In large measure, the reputation of the University of Colorado at Boulder has been built on the backs of students, and so we thank them very, very much. Having said that, I'm a little chagrined at being here today because you guys are the leaders. I think that we heard a rousing introduction to that effect and quite to the mark. We look to California as the leaders. I started doing that about 10 years ago when I started at the University of Florida. I started the sustainability program there, was the first sustainability director, then moved to Boulder about 4 years ago to take that job. So let me tell you a little bit about that transition. The University of Colorado at Boulder, right? So I show up, start doing my thing, start talking about UC Boulder. No, it's not UC Boulder. We call it CU. Okay. So moving right along, soon after that, I had to go to the University of Denver and do a introduction and a presentation there, and talking about UD, and no, it's DU. Oh. So at the risk of being mildly indelicate, let me just say that I'm really, really glad that when I was at the University of Florida, we didn't have this disease. And I am truly honored to be here today. In fact, I was nervous, and then I got really nervous because then a friend of ours, Julian Dotremont-Smith, who is usually here and the Associate Director of Asian, he's probably watching, said to me the other day, you know, of all of the sustainability conferences I go to, and as the Associate Director of Asia, he goes to all of them, this one has the highest level of discussion, the sharpest people, and the best ideas. Thanks, Julian. No pressure. Friends like that. And then I asked Matt St. Clair for some guidance on what to say here today that in any way could lend any new perspective to what you all are doing. And he said, well, you need to talk somewhere between big picture and pipe sizes. Great. So let's see if I get this working. Having said all of that, I feel quite akin to this gentleman. My favorite T-shirt. So, in the matter of what to say to you today, other than being from out of town, which always qualifies a consultant and an expert, I'm not sure that I have a lot to add, so I thought I'd start out talking about what we all know and see where that takes us. So we'll do something like this. We're going to start out kind of heavy, and then we'll bring it back from there. But I do want to talk about some tough stuff up front, because we have tough stuff up front. What about this climate justice thing? We've heard this term, and we're starting to see the emergence of climate justice activism, but it's not exactly catching fire. What are these people from all backgrounds, walks of life, cultures, asking? Why are they in DC asking for 80% by 2050 reduction in GHGs? Well, perhaps because we know we're killing the planet, and that's what we say usually. We say we're killing the planet, but I'm glad you pointed out that we're not just, this chunk of rock is going to be just fine. What we're really doing is killing the people on it. So if you look at this, and you probably have seen this, so we're talking about what we know here. This is a distorted map proportionate to the CO2 emissions in the world. And this is a distorted map in terms of the health effects of CO2 emissions in the world. And that's climate justice, or in this case, climate injustice. And we know all of this. Where do those deaths occur? A couple years ago, the UN came out with a report 150,000 to 300,000 deaths per year. Recently, there was another report higher than that. This is the old World Health Organization graphic from 2005. Where are those deaths occurring? They're occurring in places where people who are least among us live. Least wealthy, least educated, least well-fed, least political power, least able to defend themselves. And I will say this because we're in the tough talk phase of the presentation this morning, the least white. How many? This report just came out recently, and I was so pleased. I hope that the tried to make it onto the graphic. One of our peers at the University of Colorado decided to pick a fight with this, but yeah, 300,000 a year people are dying from climate change. Let's put that number in perspective. 400,000 U.S. soldiers died during World War II. Over that, a little over that. 4,300 U.S. soldiers have lost their lives so far in Iraq. 700 U.S. soldiers have lost their lives so far in Afghanistan. 50,000 or so U.S. soldiers gave their honorable lives in Vietnam over a 20-year period. And now we're losing 300,000 people a year to climate change. And we all know this, and we know also in our heart of hearts that every time we put our foot on the accelerator of a Suburban or a Prius, or by flying here today to talk to you, some little bad thing happens somewhere. So environmental justice, another brand of injustice. If we're not talking about folks over there, we're talking about folks closer to home. Environmental justice is all about diesel particulates, petroleum, VOCs, lead, noise, carcinogens of all stripe, you name it, are the bullets and the weapons of environmental justice. We don't have to go far to find these bullets meeting their mark. I'm not going to steal from you again from Professor Pastor at UC Santa Cruz. Here's 4 graphics from his work, the famous environmental justice professor at Santa Cruz. Here's LA County. Here's, I'm sorry, Bay Area. I'm from a, I mixed up UC San Diego and San Diego State yesterday too, and I really got a lecture about that. Coloradans. Toxic release inventory, emissions, points of discharge, and the percent people of color living in the surrounding neighborhoods. So we all know this. The pollution moves in next door to the people because these are the people least among us with the least defensible political power to keep that from happening. Okay, here's LA County. Yeah, I think, isn't it? And what are the byproducts of that? Here's lower test scores in the red flags in areas of high respiratory hazards, that is, diesel corridors and proximity to TRI emissions and so forth. So not only are we killing people and poisoning them, we're retarding their learning abilities. And we end up with this. And this is a really tough graphic for me because it's quite clear, and we know all of this, again, that those least white are the ones who suffer the most. So we grapple with this, all of us, because we're in the business, we know all these things. And we all spend a lot of emotional energy trying to reconcile and understand these things and do what we can to make that better every day. And we all do this, and I'm not blaming anyone. And we grapple with it, and then one day I'm sitting at home in my little form of denial, having a beer, watching a movie, and in the middle of that movie up pops Dr. King, and the movie grabs me. And Dr. King may have died in 1968, but his ability and talent for hitting a nerve is alive and well. And are we the children of light? What's remarkably different now than was happening in 1968 and subsequent decades? All right, so moving on. Sustainability, on the other hand, is the answer, right? All together. Hey, amen. So we know and we feel in our heart of hearts that if sustainability were the guiding doctrine and unifying theme of our political apparatchik and our civic society, that everything would be better, right? That this Trinity is our holy grail. We see the promise of sustainability embedded in this when we truly have integrated social, environmental, and fiscal concerns into all of our decision making. But in my experience, it's really more like this. Environmentalists complain about the economists treating environmental costs as externalities, and I wonder to what extent I treat social concerns as externalities. It's been bothering me for a long time. And how can we move that back into the middle and really make that happen? Maybe because we're too close to it, because we work in a bureaucratic world, but every time I pitch an environmental program or a sustainability program, really the first question that comes up from the administration is how much does it cost? And likewise, when my university unplugged our gas-fired cogen plant because gas spiked to a ridiculous amount, cheap by your standards, but it was killing us a couple of years ago, and decided to get our electricity off the grid, which in Colorado is heavily coal-driven, me and the entire town, a very progressive town of Boulder, our reaction was, but what about the environmental effects? What about the carbon? That's the duality. So, can we make this happen? And how can we make that happen? So, in my search for trying to really understand what people knew about integrating sustainability, we started looking around at other mechanisms. And so we come from a conservation background, and conservation by definition means conserving something. And if you conserve something, you by default create an asset. Something has been conserved, something is there, some material, fiscal, intellectual, emotional, whatever asset is created in a conservation program. So the question then, well, what are you doing with that? So we looked around at what people were doing to deal with those assets and how they were used to advance social equity. And we came up with a couple ideas and we tried them. So here's an easy one. I'm just going to talk about a couple here this morning. We tried in a energy conservation program in fraternities and sororities where they have linkage to paying the light bill, and so there's incentives. We broke down that program across the sort of traditional social, fiscal, and environmental legs of the three-legged sustainability stool, and you get these various attributes of that program. And we said, well, what can we do to enhance this? And so can we add social benefits somehow? And so we asked them, and they responded by channeling their saved dollars into the philanthropy of their choice. And in this case, fraternities picked alcohol abuse programs and and a rape awareness program. So they chose well. And also, it was effective because it helped them translate an environmental situation into something that they were comfortable with, a philanthropy, and largely sororities and fraternities are good at philanthropy. They work hard for the United Way. So this became a United Way project, and so conservation went up. So that was one little sort of dabbling in how we channeled our environmental assets into social benefits. We then tried it, and so you get this trick graphic, which I forgot about. We then tried it on a computer recycling program. So if you break down your regular consumer electric recycling program, you're seeking to recycle well, save money, and hopefully keep those computers out of third world countries where they get smashed by people with hammers and volatilizing heavy metals in their faces. And so you get a pretty good three-legged stool if you look at a recycling program. We decided, well, what can we do to add social outcomes to that? And so what we did is we started taking the university's computers and bundling them, refurbishing them, working with local schools to put these in the hands of inner city youth who needed a computer. They showed up with student mentors who helped work with those children as middle schoolers, and hopefully I'll live long enough to see one of them come into the university. These are largely communities of color that we're working in, so we get diversity outcomes. Our diversity office likes it, and so forth. So we've added a lot of social outcomes to the, oh, I got to do the trick part, to the thing that, to the program so that it works better and people want to support it more. We did it at a couple other places too. I won't bore you with that. Well, I'll bore you quickly. We did it with a compost program, local farms, growing compost from university compost and then returning that to the hungry, and we're going to do that with our organic farm and so forth. Again, trying to find those social outcomes. So, this is a good approach, but it's kind of limited. We kind of ran out of places to apply this sort of methodology, but it's a place to start thinking about it. So we started looking around for what others know about this. And so we started looking at what can we do in order to make sustainability sort of be the byproduct instead of the principal outcome. So we know that Bill McKibben has taught us that communities that unite behind something as fundamental as loving their children create sustainable outcomes. And they do so without even ever saying the sustainability word. This is the story from McKibben's book about Curitiba, Brazil, where high rates of malnutrition and solid waste buildup were happening in the favelas, which are the barrios, so around this town of 8 million people. And so the mayor said, okay, bring us your garbage, we'll give you chips for food, or chits for food at local farms and so forth. And so the garbage got collected, people got fed. And we want to do this because we want to feed our children better and make sure that they live happy, healthy lives and have access to good quality food and so forth. And in the act of doing that, they cleaned up the place, and a number of other remarkable stories about this city. And I urge you to read this book. But they never said the sustainability word. Likewise, Paul Pollack, who runs an NGO out of Denver and works in third world countries, is all about a treadle pump and micro-irrigation. That's what they do in third world countries. They teach people how to micro-irrigate and grow more crops, double their income, triple their income, grow more food for their families, create economic development through these little treadle pumps, or basically bicycles that pump water, that people can move water around, and a number of other techniques. In so doing, they've alleviated poverty and all of the negative environmental consequences that come from deforestation and so forth and so on, and never said the sustainability word. And they designed for the other 90% of the planet. I mean, we're in a pretty privileged room here, but as we all know, most of the planet isn't this well off. And so they designed for people first, and sustainability backed out of that. That happens with local food. Just concentrate on local organic food, and sustainability backs out of that. Just concentrate on feeding and creating economic development opportunities for people in your community, and sustainability backs out of that. So it sort of happens by default. All right. Looking also at what are the effects of other forms of social equity on the community. We know that social equity means stronger communities that weather economic storms better. When you have a more diverse fabric of people and economic opportunity in communities, they work better. Again, I'm ripping off one of your folks, Manuel Pastor here, but he asks very good questions. We know that from Richard, Florida, that communities that attract and retain more highly skilled labor are much more equitable communities and also weather economic storms better. Richard, Florida, in his book, writes about that. He's a planner at Carnegie Mellon. And we know that social equity means more diverse student bodies. That means better learning environments for all students. This is the main thrust of the landmark affirmative action case that the University of Michigan brought, or was brought against the University of Michigan, that went to the Supreme Court and was decided in favor of affirmative action. And President Bollinger of the University of Michigan, who's now at Columbia, championed this study that showed that diversity is good for everybody. And what can we do to create diversity? By creating social equity, by creating sustainability. It benefits everyone in so many different ways. All right. So, we'll try and put what we know together to where we're going here. What do we know from all this? We know that Old questions are re-emerging and will be asked of us again. These are tough questions, but they're not going to go away. I've already been asked these questions by students. Each of us must decide for ourselves what the right answers are, and it may be prudent for us to prepare our leadership for answering these questions as well, because we'll be asked, if we haven't already been asked these questions, what is a reasonable and ethical response to the environmental and climate injustice that we all know is happening? What are we doing? I've had students ask me, how many tons of carbon are we putting out? How many tons of carbon are there in the world? How many people are dying? Let me do the math. And I can see that student coming back to leadership saying, you know, X tons of carbon equals Y deaths. What are you doing about it? Are we the children of light? We know that when we design for social outcomes, sustainability outcomes that lead with people, conservation happens better. And this is our hypothesis that the best way to preserve the environment and to create sustainability is to focus on people first. We know that when we design for people and work with people on the front lines, we go home happier at night. Paul Hawken, one of my heroes, and I'm sure one of yours, talks about this in his most recent book and in his lectures. That when those of us who work in the environment look at the data, it's pretty easy to get depressed. The environmental data is not good. But when we work with people, and we work with community organizations, and we work with communities of color to design for people and make lives better, all of our lives better, that we go home happy at night. Working with people is a very inspiring thing, and you don't meet people that work with people that are that depressed. I mean, environmental stuff doesn't have very good facts. So Hawken always says he's an optimist because working with people makes him that way. Our goal is to transcend this whole idea of adding benefits and really understand and make our default thought pattern to design for people. I've asked, and we'll get to in a minute, some program notes, program outcomes that we're trying to dial into our programs in Boulder, where I've asked our transportation and recycling people to take a blank sheet of paper, design a transportation and a recycling program and a conservation program for people first, and see what happens differently. We know that we can't afford, in this resource-constrained world, to throw money at symptoms. If the mayor of Curitiba, Brazil, had thrown money at garbage problem, he'd have sent, I don't know, waste management in there with trucks to pick it up. It would have been a capital-intensive, single-solution response. Instead, they stepped back, looked at the people question, launched a Love Your Children campaign, fixed a bunch of problems for little money. We need to start thinking that way. The third world, that's a bad term, the developing world teaches us that because they've been dealing with a resource-constrained planet for a long time. We're just getting used to it. We know as sustainability practitioners that we must obviously keep up the conversation at all times. Sustainability is all about engagement and having people feel heard and having their input and so forth. And in your meetings and outreach, passing the shoe test, and I like to tell the shoe test story because I get to say the words Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was the mayor of Chattanooga, Tennessee, which used to be the most polluted city in the southeast, and they decided to make it a nice city, and they did. And Crockett had an axiom that when building a sustainable city, every time you have a meeting, make sure that everybody there passes the shoe test, which means look at the meeting, look under the table, and check the shoes. And if they're all nice shoes, stop the meeting because you don't have the right people there. So, and the rest is history. Chattanooga's a great place. Likewise, we can reframe some of these questions now in terms of our program. So this is what I've asked our programs in Boulder to contemplate on. Are we planning for people from the beginning? And so that's our first question of any new sustainability program. In doing so, what new partners and constituencies have you brought to the table? You know, did it pass the shoe test? Have you got new groups, new constituencies helping you with this, or is it the same old enviros? And what can you do to bring those guys in? When you're looking at a project or a program, is it all about money, or have you looked at it in terms of what is the social return on investment, and how are you framing and tracking that? And how are you articulating that? Because it's so important to make it more than just about money. You're going to have to defend this program. You better have talking points. You better have metrics about what are your social indices that make sense, that are defensible, that show that you're designing for people, that show that there's positive outcomes for the university and the community. And keep the money thing until later. They'll ask that question. And then back to, do you develop any assets in this deal, and can you use those assets in this sort of channeling assets to people and get creative about that? And this is just one methodology, and again, it has some applications and some not. What other things can you develop along the way? So the creativity in this room is boundless, and we're just scratching the surface of this. This is not what I think about as a blue-eyed, white, privileged guy from Boulder. I don't have the world experience to think about what are some of the social outcomes that need to really be resident in sustainability programs. And back to stakeholder outreach, that's not a front-loaded thing, that's an ongoing thing. And that outreach needs to happen with this attitude firmly in mind. And this is a great quote from a indigenous person in Australia that really reminds us that if I go into a community color, again, as the white, blue-eyed guy from Boulder, and say, I'm here to help you, I'm dead. But if I understand and communicate well that we're in this thing together, we got a shot at working on our mutual destinies together in a positive way, and not in a, I'm here to help you way. And the other thing to really be mindful of, and this is back to Hawken, and I'll leave you with this. Everything I've learned, well, by the way, I've learned from students. This is the most amazing attitude ever. Just chill out. Do what you can. Work with people. Feel good about it. You don't have to say everything. The facts and the scale of climate change and all of the bad facts, they'll kill you if you get wrapped around the axle of that in your mind. But if you focus on working with folks that you're connected to, with whom you share their destiny, and together you can work to make your mutual lives better, future brighter, and our present more meaningful, then you have done something. And I will leave you with that. Thank you for your kind attention. So I'm told there are questions in the queue or questions at the microphone, and see if I'm told correctly. Okay. So I guess questions either for this presentation or for the Regent's presentation. If any of you have questions, comments, or cheap shots, is what I like to tell my students. And not a semester goes by we don't get a couple of cheap shots, and we value those. There's a microphone here.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask, I often don't hear issues about population growth being brought to the forum, particularly in Boulder. I know Bartlett is a big speaker about that.
And a hero of mine.
And I wondered if you could say anything about that.
Yeah, boy, in Boulder it's illegal to not have a presentation and not talk about Professor Al Bartlett, one of our most magnificent professors emeritus, who talks well about the effects of population, and gives a lecture called Sustainability and the Exponential Function. And it's a very simple lecture. And he talks about an empty Coke bottle that's been evacuated of all matter, and putting an amoeba in there at the first minute of the hour, and through mitosis and meiosis, in the 59th minute, the population of these critters has doubled in the 59th minute. And so the bottle's half full. And what happens in the 60th minute? The bottle is full. So the exponential function is what we're seeing in the hockey stick projection of population growth on this planet, and what are we going to do about it? And it's a very troubling lecture that Dr. Bartlett gives. But we must be mindful that the exponential function can also work for us. And if we get more efficient, if we get better at our technologies and our approach to sustainability, that we can also turn that around, because we can have not just an additive but a multiplicative effect on the work that we're doing if we're clever about it. And that's his lecture. And I see from the time, it's probably time to turn this back over. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, once again, we'd like to thank Regent Bonnie Reese for her fine comments and inspiring comments. We'd also like to thank David Newport for his presentation as well. I thought it was very enlightening and provides us with a overall good perspective. And finally, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to be here, really to share your ideas, to interact, to network, and to take back some of these ideas back to the campus in which you came from. I think that this is an important issue that we're now facing. It's an important challenges and times that we're dealing with, especially with these economic challenges that we have. How can we continue to make progress during these fiscal challenges and during these fiscal times? I think these are all good ideas that we have an opportunity to address during this conference. And so once again, I just appreciate your time. Utilize some of your peers, learn, share ideas, and really help us so that we can, once again, take these ideas out with us back to our campuses, and then we'll once again meet next year in Los Angeles. So finally, have a good time here in Santa Barbara, and we're glad that you were able to be here. Thank you.